how to get that.
Right. Once it's recorded and stored, we'll disseminate the link to it.
Okay, sounds good.
And then they can reach out to you.
All right.
Well, jump on in.
So good morning, everybody. I see that we've got a couple of people otherwise online that aren't at Madison Christian Community. So that's good. Again, my name is Dan Zimmerman. It even says so on my screen. I am the co-coordinator of the Volunteer Driver Program for Dane Sanctuary Coalition. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Dane Sanctuary Coalition. That will explain some of the documents that I sent along. But first, if you wish to be on the email distribution list, to receive notices that we need a volunteer driver for an immigrant who needs to go to immigration court or one of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service offices for an asylum hearing or whatever, I need a few things from you. So I need you to remember this. It's in the email as well. I need an email from you. I need your name and your phone number. I need a copy of a photocopy or scanned copy of your driver's license and a photocopy or scanned copy of your current insurance coverage card. Those are the only things I need back from you in order to get you on the email distribution list. I wanted to make sure that with Corky that I refer to this as an orientation session, not a training session, because you aren't going to learn any skills per se. You might learn a couple of things, but it's really more of an orientation session to the volunteer driving program. So a little bit of background with regard to Dane Sanctuary Coalition. First, it's a separate nonprofit organization from Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, which I believe your congregation is a member. Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, and you can look at their website. I'm not going to go through that right now. Really is to do advocacy, with individuals in the congregation, so they don't do their own lobbying. They try to get other people to do lobbying, or at least to register their opinions about various issues. So there's a number of congregations that participate in that, which again is a separate nonprofit organization. Dane Sanctuary Coalition really was an offshoot. It became its own nonprofit organization in, if I recall correctly, 2018. So pre-pandemic. And initially, the reason that it was called it was initially Dane County Sanctuary Coalition. A number of people got confused as to whether or not we were part of the Dane County government, and we weren't. And so county got dropped from the name. But we primarily serve Dane County, immigrants who are living in Dane County. We've done a few rides for individuals outside of Dane County, but not many. We've certainly worked with Centro Hispano and Voces de la Frontera as well in terms of collaborating on the establishment. Initially, there were two primary functions for Dane Sanctuary Coalition. One was to provide, keeping in mind that this was during the Trump administration, sanctuary to immigrants that there was concern that ICE might pick them up. And so there was a family, if I recall, from Honduras, who stayed for about 6 months at the Oak, why am I blocking at it? Oak UCC. And there were a number of us as volunteers who would man the front desk to make sure that during hours where the church was not otherwise open to the public, that if ICE came, that we would be there to say, have you got a warrant to enter? But also to provide some assistance and guidance to the family. Volunteers also brought the family to the laundromat, to grocery shopping, things of that nature. Since that family found permanent housing, got a vehicle, there has not been anyone else who has been served by Dane Sanctuary Coalition at any of the churches in terms of for that same purpose, in terms of living at the church for a period of time. The other primary program for Dane Sanctuary Coalition has been the volunteer driving program. I put a lot of information with regard to this in the email that I've sent you, and so I'm not going to read through all of that. So Dane Sanctuary Coalition has its own website as well, and so it's danesanctuarycoalition.org. And on their behalf, I'll tell you that yes, you can donate to them. You can donate to Wisconsin Faith Voices as well. But so the email that I sent to Corky to forward to you lists 6 primary documents. There were a couple of others that I didn't bother sending. But some of these are really more for your reference. Some of these are historical, such as the FAQ's asylum document, Dane Sanctuary Guidelines. The only thing here that we've really carried over to the volunteer driving program as a guideline is we certainly don't want you to have to transport an unaccompanied minor at any point in time. There are, you shouldn't have to be parenting children while you're doing the driving and doing other kinds of things. But we have waived that for a couple of 17-year-olds. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but we certainly don't want you. We were trying to find another volunteer or have the child who may be staying with someone have another adult in the car with you. So that's the only guideline that otherwise applies. The Dane County Immigration Resource Center, you don't really need to know, but again, that's for your reference. It talks about some of our referring agencies. So Dane County has an immigration affairs office. They are largest. They provide the largest number of referrals or requests for rides. But the Catholic Multicultural Center, Community Immigration Law Center, it provides some of these other kinds of documents. So that's really for the background. The Cap Times article basically goes through what I'm telling you about the background with regard to Dane Sanctuary Coalition and what we've been doing. It was a nice article. We're going to go through the legal rights for volunteer drivers in a moment. But then I had some, what I've used as recruitment information about what we do. So the primary scheduled appointments are for bringing an individual to one of the USCIS offices to collect biometrics. So it's photographs, fingerprinting. They've got to complete a form that provides some identifying information, country of origin, things of that nature. Security checks. Again, you guys can read, so you've got this information. Asylum interviews, court hearings, and there's an initial court hearing. Most individuals who go to the initial court hearing do not have an attorney. And so as part of the due process rights, the judge, and there is an interpreter there, the judge asks, would you like to find an attorney, in which case this hearing will be rescheduled. And so as long as they say yes at that point, they aren't going to receive a deportation order. If they said, no, I don't want to find an attorney, it's possible that they could receive a deportation order right at that moment. Citizenship interviews. So this is much later in the process for most of the immigrants. But then we've also brought individuals to either the Community Immigration Law Center, the Catholic Multicultural Center, to meet with an attorney in preparation for an asylum hearing. And we've had a few situations where we've transported individuals for medical appointments. More recently, we've had an individual who broke both his legs, and the housing that was found for him, Madison Metro did not provide the free rideshare buses to that location in Madison, and so we stepped up and we gave him several rides so he can go to physical therapy, things of that nature. We have had a couple of requests for rides to Chicago to go to a consulate so that they can get identification papers. And I talked about here about the potential for reimbursement for the rides to Milwaukee or Waukegan or Chicago. But I'll go through that again later as we go through some things. Deneen Groh is the other co-coordinator. She really doesn't want to be the co-coordinator, but I've told her, in case I say something stupid again to my wife, which I do frequently, and my wife decides to kill me, Deneen's the backup for me in case something happens. But even when I'm out of town, I will be responding to emails and whatnot. So she has not had to do anything at this point, but she is the next in line to make sure that this continues at least for a period of time, if something were to happen to me. The last part of this is an important thing for you to understand. If you get on the email distribution list because you want to volunteer, it does not mean that you are committed to any number of rides, either per year, per month, or anything. When I send out an email indicating that we've got a request, I simply ask, are you available? If your schedule permits it, you want to, not everybody wants to drive down to Chicago. Some people say, well, I like going to Chicago. Fine, sign up for that particular request. So there's no commitment other than you're interested in potentially taking a volunteer, being a volunteer driver for a potential ride at some point in time in the future. Any questions about that? Okay, just making sure. So let's see here. Is there anything more that I want to?
Let me just say that if somebody does have questions, please let me know and I'll bring you the microphone so Dan can hear you.
Okay. All right, so moving on. The documents that I do want to go through a little bit. So you're seeing the legal rights for volunteer drivers in brief, correct? That's up on your screen? Okay. The likelihood of this coming. Now, this document would be more pertinent, and I would be emphasizing this a whole lot more if Dane County were in southern Arizona. The likelihood of you being approached by immigration or law enforcement officials, assuming that you're driving responsibly, is very low. Law enforcement and ICE are not going to know that you are a volunteer driver who has agreed to take a particular individual to a USCIS office or to immigration court or whatnot. But more importantly, if they did know, which I can't imagine that they would unless they're tapping blinds and looking at everybody's emails, if that were to occur, this goes through what you can do, what your rights are. But again, I think the likelihood of this occurring is very low. More importantly, you are taking all of the immigrants have got an appointment. These are not, they aren't going to Milwaukee, Waukegan, or Chicago without an appointment with USCIS or immigration court or whatnot. And they are supposed to bring that paperwork with them. If they forget that, I often have a copy of it, either as an attachment or we've got the email thread from USCIS or immigration court as part of the documentation that you'll receive. So if you were stopped it for any reason, you can show them, that here's this information. We're going to Milwaukee, for a security check, and here's the email. Here's all of these documents, yada yada yada. But if you were pulled over and you suspect that a law enforcement officer is profiling you because you've got some individuals in your car that may not be, in their opinion, citizens, or that they may be here without documentation, which is true. They're supposed to have a warrant to search your car. And I'll scroll through this, but I did send this to you so that you can see this. They should have a search warrant or an arrest warrant. But they can't go in, they can't enter your car or force you to pop the trunk open without justification. And so this is what it's going through. You don't want to be non-compliant. We don't want you arrested. And so it mentions, they have the right to search you or your rider to make sure you aren't carrying weapons or illegal materials. But again, they have to have cause to think that. They aren't supposed to just stop you for any reason. We are saying if stopped in your car, follow the officer's instruction, provide your license registration, proof of insurance, yada, yada, yada. You don't have to consent to giving the officer to access to your car or to your passengers or to yourself. There are two YouTube videos here, a shorter version and a longer version that you could watch. Again, the way that the volunteer driver in another state is going through this is more pertinent if he were, and it's a guy in these videos, if he lived in Southern California, Southern Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. We've never had a driver stopped and questioned about these kinds of things. But I want a judicial warrant, which is signed by a judge. This is valid if it is signed by a judge, not an administrative warrant, but a judicial warrant. And so it should indicate that this is a judge. Then you need to comply with what the judge's order is for search and seizure. This is an example of an administrative warrant signed by an immigration officer. This does not have the same force of law. They do not have the right to search and seize property or individuals. And then here's an administrative warrant again. But it has to be a judicial order for search and seizure or arrest for this to be something that truly is legally binding on you. Now, if the individual is not in your car, then some of these things may be pertinent. But again, the likelihood that this is going to occur, and again, the response that I'd give is we are following we've got an appointment with USCIS or with immigration court. We're on our way there. We are complying with the process. That really is the process there. Any questions with regard to that? Okay, so I can close this one.
Can you hear me, Dan?
Yeah,
I just wanted to underscore what you just said. There's nothing illegal in what we're doing here. We're actually complying with the instructions and the orders of the various agencies these people have to deal with.
absolutely. We are simply providing a ride for that particular individual or family or group of individuals.
Thanks.
So the next thing that I want to go through, so when we get a request and you volunteer, you say, I'm available. I will tell you right now that I do have, I usually we try to get a backup driver as well, not just the primary driver, because we have had situations where people, someone did come down, test positive for COVID the day before they were supposed to give someone a ride. And so having a backup driver is just prudent. We don't always get a backup driver, but and it's so that we can ensure that the ride will go through. I try to get a primary driver and a backup driver. And I usually assign those based upon whoever volunteers first. But I do give a preference to individuals who are new. I want to make sure that you guys get an experience shortly after you get onto the email distribution list. And individuals who haven't volunteered a whole lot. We've got some individuals, and I'll mention, given that he arranged this orientation session, Corky Custer is one of our frequent flyers. I don't know that you fly down I-94 to Milwaukee or Waukegan, but you've had, I think last year you had 12 or 13 rides that you gave, so about once a month. We have some individuals we have many individuals who are not that reliable or who don't volunteer that often. Some people are still working, and so it's when they can arrange their schedule to have an open time. Some haven't been able to because they're providing a lot of assistance to grandchildren. All of that's fine. I don't need to hear your reasons why you can't. I just don't want to indicate to our referring agencies that we are unable to provide a ride for an individual. And so when Corky mentioned that I send emails frequently, until I get someone, I will be tenacious. I will continue to send an email daily and say, this is the third try. And so if you don't receive an email from me, it means everything is hunky-dory. We've got rides for all of the requests up to date. And that's a good thing. I try not to send emails on the weekend. I try to give you a break from seeing emails from me. One of the documents that you will see is I've got driver instructions for the various places that you're going to go to. So I'm just going to show this to you now. So this gives you the address for the USCIS office on Knapp Street in Milwaukee. It opens at 7:30. Their first appointments are at 8 o'clock. They generally do not allow people into the building until 30 minutes prior to their appointment time. I've got instructions about how to get there. Most of you've got GPS on your phone or in your car. Use them. It's a good thing. But I've got instructions here, for example, how far it is after you cross the river in terms of getting into the building. Got other kinds of things here. I've got information about parking, reminders about preparing for the trip. So the driver information form, which I'm going to show you one in a moment. And it's got the biometric appointments don't last long. The security check appointments can be half an hour to 4.5 hours. So pay attention to where you're parking. The parking, there are meters, there are spaces that are 3-hour spaces. Parking enforcement does monitor those places. And so, yes, I've gotten a ticket because I thought, oh, we're going to be done just a little while. And no, it was 4 hours. And so I got a parking ticket. There is a parking lot, parking ramp. There are some parking meters that are available. It's a good idea if you contact the rider or the rider's attorney, the referring agency, a day or two before, to confirm the pickup location, remind them that you're going to be there at this point in time. Some of our riders live in apartment complexes, so finding the building can be challenging. We've had a few riders of late that live out in Dane, so in rural Dane County, but in the township of Dane. So use GPS, but even then it may be difficult to find some of these locations a little bit. Anyway, it's always a good thing if the appointment letter is not attached or is not in the email thread to the email that I send. Make sure that they've got their identification card, photograph from Border Patrol, their appointment letter, other pertinent documents. But you will have the most important things if they've got some identification card or identification. That's good. I put in yellow this notion that you may not be allowed to enter, but I'm going to digress from what this document says. Prior to COVID, I always went in with the riders. It has a number of different advantages. One of which is then when the appointment is done, and they don't have to find you, and you can just leave then. But for biometrics in the Milwaukee office, the waiting area has limited seating. And so they have the security staff have not allowed volunteer drivers in at times unless you're there to help assist the rider in some kind of way. So I took I took a family at one point in time. They had 3 kids, and one kid was certainly under 2 years of age. I said, I'm here to assist the family. No problems. They let me through. I went one time with a retired chemistry professor from Baghdad and his wife, both of whom were were somewhat unsteady on their feet. Security staff didn't ask any questions. They'd seen me beforehand, and they just let me on in with them. There is a vestibule outside in the Milwaukee, outside of the security area, that you could wait in if you don't want to wait in your car. But there's also some restaurants like Panera, and there are other restaurants that are nearby that you could go and wait at and have coffee and whatnot. You're going to have information about the referring attorney or agency. That's going to be in the driver request form, and I'll show you that in a moment. Again, you're there, and you're just there to provide a ride and support. But you're going to have the documentation with regard to the appointment, or the individual's going to have that. That's what you can say. We are there as, again, either to drive or to provide assistance or support, but we are not offering legal advice or opinions to the rider or anybody else. particularly if there's kids in the car, if they're going to be kids riding along, having mom or dad or you bring some water and snacks is a good idea. So the kids, oftentimes the families, because we're picking people up early. A lot of the appointments for Milwaukee are at 8 o'clock. So you're picking people up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so the kids often have not eaten at any breakfast or anything. So that's a good idea. Give some information about lunch and snacks, some nearby restaurants. This is a reminder simply from the legal rights of volunteer drivers that we had. And then a reminder with regard to the second page of the volunteer driver information form. I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Any questions about this? Lots of information in there. You'll have that in writing, so you don't need to store it. I'll remember to send that along with the for any appointments that you get, unless it doesn't involve going to USCIS. Not hearing any questions, I'll close this tab. Similarly, I've got one for immigration court. And so there are some links here for some where you can reserve a spot that's, where it's nearby. And so you can look that up going to this website. I've got a couple of others. I talk about the tolls and the cost. If you wish, you could take a train instead. And for people who don't want to drive in Chicago, this certainly would be an alternative. Trip preparations, again, in terms of reminders, same kind of things, but there are some differences with regard to unique to going to immigration court. I'm not going to read through all of that. This issue for unrepresented persons that you may be giving a ride to. It's just reminding you that this is not legal advice. If you simply tell them this is when you want to say "sí," yes. If they say yes when the interpreter is asking this question, again, the judge will say, "Do you want an attorney to represent you?" And then the translator will repeat it in Spanish. We have had individuals who are not Spanish speakers, such as the retired professor from Baghdad. But most of the individuals are Spanish speakers, but they will have a translator. They will repeat that in Spanish. And all you got to do is, this is where you say, yes, sí. And that is not legal advice. I've gotten a confirmation from some of the immigration attorneys that is assistance. I've got information about lunch and snacks in Chicago, yada, 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 and other reminders.
I just want to underscore again, folks, that these instruction sheets, if you accept a ride, one of the first things you get is these instruction sheets along with the information about your rider.
So this is the driver request form.
And
that you will get.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just curious, if you have a female that you would be transporting, would that be the driver be a female driving then kind of thing? You're not putting a male in with a female, are you, or vice versa?
Well, let me expand that a little bit. We have one female volunteer driver who does not want to provide rides to unaccompanied males. And I do what I can to try and honor that. So there are some Spanish names that I can't figure out whether or not it's male or female. I've got one referring agency person who now tells me if they're male or female, so that helps, but not always. So I will try to respect that if, to the extent that I can, if I know that information. But as to your specific question, unless you as a driver have that kind of issue, or unless the referring agency specifies that the rider prefers a male or female driver, this is open for anybody. So there's a recent request that came in for an individual where I said a male driver is preferred but not required. This individual has some mental health issues where my background is in mental health. I worked for the state for 40 years. Most of that time was in the Division of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And I've worked directly with persons with adults who have schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, yada, yada, yada. And I had a long discussion with the referring agency about this individual and issues. I don't think that it has to be a male or female. It's just the person may respond a little bit better to a male. But if a female is assertive and, and knows how to respond to things, and I spent some time going through this in advance, there's no reason why it couldn't be a female driver. That answer the question?
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. The driver request form. So the referring agency is supposed to complete the top of this form. So anything above driver information here. So the pickup information, the date, they don't usually put in the pickup time, and sometimes I adjust this. But what is the appointment time? That is important. Where they're going to. So after I receive this, and after we've got a volunteer driver, I'm highlighting the information so it's easier for the volunteer driver to see the information. But this one is checked. They're going to Knapp Street, to the USCIS office in Milwaukee. Pickup location. What's the purpose of this? Security, it's a security check or immigration check. Doesn't matter, how it's worded, it's the same thing. Now, the referring individual at the agency or the individual referring attorney is here in terms of their contact information. So you've got all of this in the email. If you want to print this off, that's fine, but it's in the email so that you can potentially pull it up, along with those driver instructions. Will there be an attorney present? Never for just the security checks, never for the biometrics. It'd be for an asylum interview, an immigration hearing. Those are when the attorneys are present. The individual's name, their primary language. I do have them checking off. There have been just one or two individuals that are not COVID vaccinated, but we're having them indicate that. If the person's a minor, and then I have further discussion as to what's going on there, because then there should be additional riders. But the rider's phone number, is it okay to text them? Yes. So the additional riders could be you're giving a ride to a family. And so it should have ages. And then we want information about, will a car seat be provided for the children under 8 years of age? I do have an infant car seat, a convertible car seat, and a booster seat that can be borrowed. So depending on the age of the kid, I've done some handoffs where I've loaned out our car seats, my car seats. So here, this is the volunteer driver and his contact information. And so the referring agency knows, and they can tell the rider, this is the kind of car that's going to be pulling up. at 5:45 a.m., this particular rider is going to take 2 individuals. And so 5:45. So I try to set the pickup time with some fudge room for traffic delays, whether it's due to traffic or construction or weather, but also then, in this case, some additional time to get from one person's place to the next person's place so that you can hit the interstate. And this is the backup driver's name and phone number. So ideally, if Harry was ill or had, his car's not working, rather than calling me, ideally you'd call Tom and say, Tom, you still have this on your calendar so that you don't have to, so that you've got somebody who's going to drive the individual. And so Tom would say, sure. On page 2, and this can be, this response can be sent via email to me, and I will copy and paste it in here. I want to report as to any problems with the pickup or the destination place, problems with USCIS staff, with the rider, instructions, anything that you think might be pertinent. Because I do try to then make sure that the referring agency is aware of that, and whether or not you want reimbursement. And I've got the reminder here about the travel expenses, what the reimbursement rates are. But this can be sent via email as well, and I'll copy and paste that in. So this is a Microsoft Word fillable form, but if you don't want to have to monkey around with that, put it in an email, and I'll take care of it. Any questions with regard to this form?
My question is about, my car probably won't handle more than 3 additional people.
Yep.
So I know that when you are sending it out, how many passengers it includes, so that I might myself decide that I'm not a candidate for this group? Or how is that choice made, matching your car to the group?
Brilliantly. Let me give you an I know I can't, because I'm doing it as part of shared screen. Let me show you a request that's a little old. There we go. So like I said, I update these. I'll add in information as I need. 5th and final try, because this was sent on the 16th, and the appointment was for the next day. And so if I didn't find somebody by the end of the day, we had to tell the referring agency we didn't have a ride for the person. But here we've got, under number 3, new and urgent. 2 gentlemen, both of whom are vaccinated, have a security check appointment in Milwaukee on Monday the 27th at 8 o'clock. So same purpose, same time, same place. One of the homes is by the Beltline and Park Street. The other is out by the airport off of Highway 51. Are you available? Whether it's for one or both of the drivers. This was one, so the driver request form that I just showed you, both the primary driver and the backup driver agreed to take these 2 gentlemen. But the 4th item here, 5th try, a gentleman, his partner, and 4-year-old daughter. And there's some issues about the court hearing in terms of the time. The wife received a letter stating 9:30 for that same day, but online it says 11 a.m. Well, we want the we want to make sure that they get there for 9:30 just in case. But because this is a 4-year-old, either a convertible car seat or a booster seat is required by law. And so as part and parcel of that give and take, I'd make sure that either there was that the referring agency said, yeah, they've got a car seat or booster seat, or yeah, you can borrow one from me if you don't have one. We'd figure that out. So yes, I try and put that kind of information in. I assume that that example was useful.
Yep. Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Okay, let's close this. I can close that one. The last document that I really want you to see is there are some things that we've requested of our referring agencies. Information, because we weren't getting this all the time.
And Dan, you're a co-host, and we have a person who's in the waiting room trying to get in.
Okay. And so I need to allow them in.
Please.
And I'm trying to remember how to do that. Stop sharing for the moment. And
Maybe I could do it on this.
mute me. Chat, record, actions.
Oh, there it is, right there at the top. Thank you. I think we got it.
You got it?
Well, yes, bingo. All right.
Okay. Sounds good. So this last document, I will often send this with for biometrics and security check appointments. But this will tell you, the kinds of questions that we're asking of the referring agencies in terms of the general questions. But then I want them to let the rider know various kinds of things. I'm going to skip through that right now because I'm going to show you on page 3, Dane County Immigration Affairs Office has translated that information for the rider into Spanish. And so I will tell you, it's a good thing to print this off and to write your phone number right here where there's a blank space under number 4, so that if you don't go into the office with them, they know where to, they've got your phone number so that they can call you. But this is reminding them to bring their appointment letter and identification, what the pickup time is. And so when I send this to you, I'm also sending this information to the referring agency. They should wear a mask while they're in the car. We've got a number of volunteer drivers that are still concerned about COVID, but also other diseases and infectious diseases that might be shared. A reminder about you may not be allowed into the building, yada, yada, yada. But some instructions for security checks in Milwaukee. I have not been to the office in Waukegan, but I was in Milwaukee often. And so here's where, if they don't sign in, there's a sign-in sheet on a clipboard, on a chair, folding chair, at the bottom of the stairs behind the security people. If they don't sign in, they're going to be waiting a long time for sure. And so it's important that they sign in and then proceed upstairs to the waiting area. So again, this is translated into Spanish so that they've got that. We've had some riders that are not fluent readers in or writers in Spanish either. So, ideally, this has been conveyed to them orally by the referring agency. What happens with the biometric appointments? But then, depending on how long it takes for these appointments, that you may offer as a volunteer driver, offer to stop for a bite to eat. Now, I don't know your financial situations, but most of the volunteer drivers, and certainly when I was doing a lot of the rides, I've got a pension. I'm now on Social Security as of January of this year. But I've got plenty of resources. I've got no problems providing them, paying for their meal. And they shouldn't be bashful about accepting that. One of the very first rides that I provided, 2019, was to a father, daughter, and grandfather, and another daughter. And the father felt that I paid for lunch for the grandfather and the two kids. And I think he felt uncomfortable about that. He was really insistent on giving me $100, pay for lunch, but also I think for the ride. We are not coyotes. They don't need to pay us. If you don't want to pay for their lunch, that's one thing. But you certainly shouldn't. You should ideally refuse payment if you're offered any payment for the ride. And again, we do have this policy to prohibit volunteer drivers from transporting a minor without another adult accompanying the driver and the minor. Although we've waived that requirement for some 17-year-olds. So those are the documents that I wanted to go through, and that's the background. And now we're already an hour past, but are there questions?
I have a couple of quick questions. How many rides does your agency arrange for per week or month?
It's grown, and I think it will continue to grow. Initially, I think that it was a lot of referring agencies either had to learn about the service that we provide. But it was also then for immigrants to be contacting some of these referring agencies. So initially it was only like 6, 8 a month. But it really mushroomed. Well, and then there was COVID, and the USCIS offices were shut for a period of time. So for a year, there were no rides. But as of November, December, January, we've had as many as 25 requests per month. And there have been a number since then that we have not found a volunteer driver for. And I would like that, with the infusion of your warm bodies and willingness, I'm hoping that we don't have to have that situation going forward.
Quick question. Are all the forms that you had on the screen today, are they printable through what was sent to Corky? You can just answer that yes or no.
Yeah, they're all printable. I mean, It's either PDF documents or Microsoft Word documents.
Okay, great, thanks. And then lastly, is there an emergency number if we were transporting someone, for example, to Chicago and halfway there, something came up that we needed to contact someone about something? Is there an emergency number? Briefing?
Yes and no. So it depends on the individual. We've got a space in there for, an emergency contact for medical issues. It's rare that that's been completed by the referring agency. But the referring agencies, the name of an individual and the agency and their phone number is in there. And that's who I would call if there's otherwise not information with regard to a personal representative per se.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Other questions?
What's the next step for people? They need to email you their driver's license and insurance information?
And phone number.
And phone number. There we go.
And phone number.
And if I can get
that is the next step for them, because without the well, I've got everyone's email address. I don't have a name necessarily associated with that. And so, yes, the email is important, but phone number is important because not only for the driver request form where I put that information in there, but also to the extent that there are questions, then I would call you. Certainly for your first ride, I would call and make sure that you receive the documents. If we need to refresh your memory with regard to various issues, we can do that. Make sure that you're comfortable and know what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Well, Dan, thanks so much for taking your time on us on the Sunday afternoon, and you'll be hearing from us.
Thank you for arranging this, and thank you for your interest in volunteering.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very much. If you've got any last, and if you think of questions later, please reach out to me. As you can see, Dan is a great organizer and he's very thorough. He's sometimes a little more thorough than maybe necessary.
You mentioned all those documents he was producing. Do you have them or will they come?
If you accept a ride, you get all that stuff that you need. You get the information about the driver, you get the instructions.
Right now, to get into the program,
Oh,
just send our information to him.
damn, exactly. A photocopy of your driver's license, your phone number, and a photocopy of your insurance. And I will provide that to everybody. I'll send that back out. It actually was the email you got about this meeting was copied to him, but I'll send it out again. Yeah, Dan Zimmerman. Okay.
Are you still on the Zoom? Do you intend to still be on the Zoom?
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Bill. I don't even, let's see, where are we? I'm in post attendee already. I wonder.
Hello, Corky.
See, I wonder if that's on the Zoom. Hi. We're all done, so you can get us out. All right. Well, and please grab some donuts.